Okay? So when those muscles constrict, you can't get air in, right? And what does an asthma patient sound like? Right? They start wheezing. Why? Because those air tubes are getting smaller. Okay? Have gotten small and they can't get the air in, right? We want the opposite. Yes? Now, it happens to me occasionally. I used to run a lot of 5Ks, and several times we had the XIT, the 5K race, and I would run the mile, which I was better at, then I'd run the 5K, and if it was real cool and very, very humid, right, about halfway through, you'd hear me every breath, right, because I was trying to keep up with Ed Craighead. But anyway, yes. And I remember one race, I ran across the finish line, and he beat me by 8 or 10 seconds. And then he comes running over there, "Are you okay? You're not breathing right." So some people get the exercise-induced asthma, right? With me, it was only when it was cool and really damp. But anyway, okay? We inhale irritants, right? And the parasympathetic comes on. Let the air tubes get small, right? Yes. Now, the treatment generally is epinephrine, right? Epi, which will make those breathing tubes get big. Yes. Okay. Now, there are many treatments now. Of course, now they're finding out that a lot of it is inflammation, and they were treating you every day, with an start saying anti-inflammatory. What is it? Uh, Forgive me, it escaped me. Okay, basically to keep the inflammation down. Okay, that's very common now. People will also have the rescue inhaler, right? The rescue inhaler, Ventolin or something like that. They'll and it instantly make those tubes get bigger, but you don't want to be using that a lot. But they're treating chronic asthma with several medications that decrease the inflammation, right? Asthma is associated with IgE, immunoglobulin E, and also the eosinophils, right? Remember one of the white blood cells? It's eosinophils. And if the eosinophils are high, you think asthma, or you ask them, did you go to a third world country and drink some water? Because eosinophils are also associated with if you went to Guatemala and drank some nasty water and got worms, right? But most of the time, if you haven't been out of the country, they're associated with asthma, okay? Right? Immunoglobulin E is going to be high too, okay? Now, asthma is really increased over the last 30 or 40 years and such. And one theory is called why that is because the hygienic theory or hygienic hypothesis, and that is this. Many years ago, 100 years ago, almost everyone lived in rural America, and we all had animals, and we milked the cows every day, and we had chickens and this and that. And as a child, you had chores to do, and you were exposed to certain things in the environment, like pet dander and this and that. Okay, but nowadays, a lot of kids grow up in New York City in a high-rise apartment, right? And they're never exposed to any of those things when they're young, okay? And we wash our hands like crazy and use hand sanitizer like crazy, right? And such. And so the theory is that because you have not had these assaults or whatever on your immune system, that it doesn't develop. And then when you are exposed to things, right? Yes? So what does that mean, ladies? That means when your kid's 3 or 4 years old and he wants that puppy, you get him the puppy. You let him have a cat because he's much less likely to have asthma when he's 12 or 13 or 14. Right? Yes? And, of course, I had 3 cats and 2 dogs. Now I'm down to 1 cat, 1 dog, and I can't wait till the cat's gone. It's my wife's putting. Has hyperthyroid, drives me crazy. She's been gone a week. It's pulling its hair out, and it's going, right? And then the freaking cat wants to come over and sit on me when I'm watching TV on the recliner, right? Cat hates me, but she's been gone almost a week, right? Don't get too close to me, ladies, because I might hug you, okay? Because my wife's been gone a week, so I'm just warning you, don't get too close. So, but anyway, the hygienic, it's very common. The hygienic theory or hygienic hypothesis, right, as to, because asthma's just exploded, yes? And if it's bad enough, I had a patient, her husband, he went down in the basement Thanksgiving, they moved some insulation around, he breathed it, he went into an asthma attack, the ambulance got there, right? There's a doornail, but anyway, okay? ERDS, Infant Respiratory Distress Syndrome, okay? ERDS. Infant respiratory distress syndrome. Right? Right? The cause is you're born prematurely and you have too little surfactant. By the way, surfactant is a chemical. They say it makes water wetter and the water flows easier with the surfactant. Yes? There's surfactants in laundry soap, right? So the water will go through your clothes and help clean them better. Okay? The lungs develop in the last 2 months in utero and such. And children that are born early, they put them in a ventilator and they will spray some surfactant into the air that they're breathing to try and help with that, to try and keep their lungs from collapsing. Yes? And it says many preemies suffer from bronchopulmonary dysplasia. Bronchopulmonary dysplasia because the ventilator forces air in and out of the lungs and such. Okay, so you save their life, but many times they have lung problems, respiratory problems afterwards. I can attest to that because I had a friend with a premature. Okay, right? Okay. Okay. We already talked about partial pressure, right? Dalton, you add up the numbers and the partial pressure. Basically, you add up the nitrogen, the pressure from the nitrogen, the pressure from the oxygen, the pressure from the CO2, the pressure from the water vapor, and you get a total. And basically, the only reason is we say PO2, that's where it comes from, partial pressure, and PCO2. Those are the two that we deal with in the healthcare, right? Or if you're a scuba diver and you get the bends, maybe the pressure of nitrogen also. But anyway, okay? We talked about Henry's law, which basically tells us that it's high pressure. If the oxygen is high, it's going that way. If the CO2 is high, it's going that way, right? In the lungs, this way to this way, and in the tissue, it's the opposite. CO2 goes into the bloodstream, oxygen goes out of the bloodstream, okay? We're going to have a whole, I don't think I'll do that tonight, talking about how hemoglobin carries oxygen and CO2 also, and how it's carried in the blood. But I don't think I'm going to do that tonight. I'm going to save that for tomorrow night. So, boy, oh boy, right? But talking about Henry's law, though, too. A hyperbaric chamber, yes. What does a hyperbaric chamber do? You get in the chamber, they pump more and more oxygen in there, right? And so the oxygen in the blood is very high, okay? Normally it's 95, 96%, right? But it raises it up and it forces more oxygen in the tissues. And that's good for people with the bends. That's good for diabetics where they have a sore on their foot that won't heal. Okay, the hyperbaric chamber is good for that. And let's see, there's one other. Diabetics, the bends, and oh yeah, carbon monoxide. If you get carbon monoxide poisoning, you can die very easily, right? And such, and they will put you in a hyperbaric chamber, and it will force oxygen into your tissues and force the CO2 out, or the carbon monoxide, carbon monoxide. It'll force that out because carbon monoxide wants to bind to hemoglobin and not let the oxygen be picked up, and that's why you die. Okay? Okay, 726, page 726, which is figure 21.20, figure 21.20. Okay, let's go ahead and dabble in this. Okay. Oxygen is carried by hemoglobin, right? Hemoglobin can carry 1, 2, 3, 4 molecules, up to 1, 2, 3, 4 molecules, right? Okay. Let me draw the little picture here. PO2, and this is saturation. Okay. Right, this is the oxygen dissociation curve, right? And basically what I need you to get from this is this. Oxygen's carried by hemoglobin, and hemoglobin can carry up to 4 molecules, right? And if it has 4 molecules, if a molecule of hemoglobin is carrying 4 molecules of oxygen, it is said to be 100% saturated. Right? 100% saturated. It can't carry anymore. It's saturated, right? Yes? It's saturated. Oh, by the way, if it's only carrying 3 molecules, okay, 100% minus 1/4, right? 1/4 is, okay, what would the saturation be there?
75.
Bingo. If you did another one, what would it be? 50%. Here, 25%, right? Exactly right. Okay, so 25, 50, 75, I'm not going to draw them. But my point being is 1, 2, 3, 4. It can carry. Yes? Now, what happens is this, right? What happens is this. Normally our oxygen saturation in our blood is 94, 5, or 6, somewhere along in there, right? Yes? And when a molecule of oxygen comes off, right, and goes into the tissues, the saturation goes down a little bit, okay? But what happens is this, okay? Based on how much oxygen is carrying, based on the oxygen available, right, at a certain area. Remember, oxygen is going to move from high pressure to low pressure, right? And what's going to happen is that there's a curve. It's not a straight line, okay? And what happens is this. Actually, I'd say this, okay? The oxygen dissociation curve can move left or right, depending on what I'm doing. If I'm laying on the couch, it'll move this way, and not as much oxygen will be unloaded. If I am exercising like crazy, running at full speed, it will move this way, okay? And this is called the oxygen dissociation curve. And we know that because of Christian Bohr. It's called the Bohr effect. Christian Bohr, right? Oh, by the way, I think I think it was his son, by the way, Niels Bohr, his son Niels, right? Niels Bohr, right? Right? Here's your nucleus, yes. Here's your electrons floating around, yes. The Bohr atom. You got your protons here. You got your neutrons here, right? The Bohr atom. He won the Nobel Prize for that. Yes, Niels did. But anyway, he come from a line of smart people, is what I'm saying. Okay, right? I think he's Norwegian or Swiss. Anyway, Norwegian or from Denmark. Anyway, Christian Bohr, the oxygen dissociation curve. Okay, and what that means is this. Oxygen is so amazing. Hemoglobin is so amazing. At times it carries more oxygen and lets go of more oxygen when we need more oxygen. And it gives off less when we need less. Okay? And that's based on many different factors. The number one factor is CO2, right? When the CO2 goes up, then what happens is that when the CO2 goes up, then what happens is our blood becomes more acidic, right? And we give off more oxygen. When the CO2 level is very low, the blood is more basic, and we don't give off as much oxygen. And that shifting back and forth is a left or a right shift of the oxygen dissociation curve. And I like to explain it like this, right? Remember last night I talked about my favorite movie, Zulu, right? Yes? And in the movie Zulu, the quartermaster has been injured, but the Zulus are coming on, and he gets a box of ammunition and he rips the lid off of it. And it's foil packed, and he rips the foil off, right? And he's been injured in his leg, so he's crawling. And he crawls up, and the guys are around the steps, and he crawls around, and every guy on the step gives him a handful of ammunition. Then he pulls it some more, and he gives the next guy a handful of ammunition. And he pulls it some more, and he gives the next guy, and he goes all the way around, right? And the guys that have no ammunition, almost none, he gives more. And the guys that haven't been shooting, right? Because usually the Zulus, they would attack from this side and from that side, not all the way around at the same time. But anyway, okay? So, depending on what they needed, is how much ammunition he would give them. Depending on if you're exercising, you need more oxygen in your tissues. If you're not exercising, you need less. Okay? And that's a shift in the Bohr effect is what it is. Okay? Anyway, now, why is that a big deal? What does that matter to, right? If you go around like this, breathing through your mouth, right? Then what will happen is that the oxygen dissociation curve will shift this way, and you won't get as much oxygen. If you keep your mouth shut, and breathe through your nose, it will shift more this way and you'll get more oxygen, right? Yes? Think about someone who's a salesperson on the phone all day long or a teacher all day long that has class after class. What am I doing? Breathing through my mouth for hours at a time. And you know what? You're tired at the end of the day. You're very tired at the end of the day. Did I do any physical work? Well, yeah, I did today, but anyway, right? But I'm just saying, because all the mouth breathing, because all the talking, I didn't get as much oxygen as if I had my mouth shut. And by the end of the day, that's why you're so tired. Okay? Because you didn't get as much oxygen. Conversely, you keep your mouth shut, you get more oxygen, you're not so tired at the end of the day. You get more oxygen, your heart doesn't have to beat as much. Okay? And such. So that's why it's important to keep your mouth shut and breathe through your nose. Right? Yes? Ladies, beware the mouth breathers, right? Yes? But anyway, so it's very important. Yes? Kids are very bad about this. If your kids do that, you need to stop them. Because when you breathe through your mouth all the time, it makes your nose, it makes your face very narrow and very long, right? Yes? And the arch where the teeth, right, is very narrow, and you have very crooked teeth. You look at the Aborigines or any native people like that, right? They have beautiful teeth and a nice round instead of this real narrow, right? Okay? And such. It's very common. Yes? Causes all kinds of problems. I know I read a book, James Nestor, about this breathing and such. And he spoke a lot about this, and he said all the dentists know that and this and that. So, right? I talked to Dr. Dunham. Hey, Dr. Dunham, right? Breathe through the mouth, narrow thing, crooked teeth, all kinds of dental problems, this and that. Is it? Are you familiar? Oh yes, absolutely. I see these kids in their bath, and when they do the dental, put the braces on them, what do they have to do? Stretch that upper palate so their teeth are nice and round, right? So there's room. Yes. I had very crooked teeth, only in the olden days when they were dumb, I had 4 teeth cut out, healthy teeth right here, right? To make room. Now I have straight teeth, right? I still have those holes there and there, right? Nowadays, they generally wouldn't do that. They would stretch your upper palate, your lower palate. To, yeah, and there's a deal on the top of the mouth, and they go in and stretches. I've been told it's not fun. My nieces and nephews, right? But anyway, so it affects how you look. It affects how you breathe. It affects you getting sick or not. They even say, some say you have more cavities. Anyway, I don't know. But it's a big deal. You need to breathe through your nose. That's what it's for. That's what it's designed for. And not your mouth. Yes? Yes, when you turn it on in full speed, I get close to the top of the mountain, I'm mouth breathing. You have to, because it's just can't get enough air in through the nose, right? But as much as I can in the lower, I keep my mouth shut to release more oxygen. So I'm not so tired, because believe me, you get tired. I'm probably going to do one this weekend. Probably 12 miles, 6 up, 6 down, and 5,600 feet, because I got to go up 1,000, then down 1,000, then I'm at the bottom of the mountain, then I got to go climb. And then on the way out, oh, by the way, up 1,000, down 1,000. Jeez, yeah. So I'm probably going to hike in. I did it last time in one day, but I think I'm going to hike in over the first couple miles. I'm not as young as I used to be. But anyway, so the oxygen dissociation curve, Christian Bohr, right? He told us that Oh, by the way, there's another one called the Haldane effect, and the Haldane effect is just the opposite. If I have a bunch of CO2, if I give off a lot of oxygen here, then there's going to be a lot of CO2 in my tissues that's going to go on. It's the Haldane effect. This is the opposite. But anyway, okay? So, I hope I've impressed upon you. Breathe through your nose, not your mouth. Don't let your kids do that. Okay, now, when you go to high altitude, right? We said normally 93, 94, 95, 96, somewhere along in there is your oxygen saturation. When you go to high altitude, guess what? You still have that saturation. Generally, ask me how I know, because I checked at 14,000 feet, okay? You still have high saturation. Why? Why? Because amazing hemoglobin, it goes this way and gives you more oxygen, right? Now, you see a person with COPD or congestive heart failure, and they put it on them, and they're maybe 89. I had a friend, David, 84. You know, he was a convenience store manager. I walked in there, oh, David, he looked pale, he looked faint. The deal on, yeah, I'm not feeling too good. Yeah, 84 instead of 96, right? Yes, gotta get the oxygen on. About 2 weeks later, I went in, and he wasn't there. He's about my age, and the opposite of me, shorter, thicker, and not very good health from smoking all those years, right? The lady that was the manager after him said, Dr. Weld, I gotta talk to you. I said, oh, okay, what'd I do? She said, no, she said, David died. Shocker. He was like 10 or 12 years young. And anyway, yeah, I'm not a fan of cigarettes. So, okay, on the second half of that page, you see this. Right close to the heart, right close to the lungs, the concentration of oxygen is higher, and the pressure, the PO2. And as we go further away from the heart, it gets lower. Okay? And what happens is that our book shows, you know, a little girl laying on the ground, and she's about 75% saturated when she's resting. But if you start exercising in that muscle, you're burning that oxygen, right? And the pressure, and the saturation will go down to about 40% in working muscles, right? Muscles, they're burning that oxygen, okay? Metabolically active tissue, okay? The PO2 is even lower, okay? When the PO2 goes lower, more oxygen, it's going to shift this way, and more oxygen is going to come. And people that are super aerobic athletes, what's going to happen? They're people that can unload oxygen at a very high rate and a very high concentration. They have a high VO2, it's called, right? High VO2. And the guy with the highest VO2 doesn't always win the race, but commonly does, okay? So, okay. Let me see where else I'm at. Okay. Let's take a break for just a minute, if we would. If you would remind me to turn that